Oh, hello, America, and hello, nuclear aficionados around the world. Welcome to nuclear.com Daily. This is Wednesday, December 11th, 2013. I'm Steve Schulin of nuclear.com, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be part of your day. I'm coming to you from the offices here at North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, of www.nmb.sc. See, I've got a few of the nuclear art here on the wall already. One of my favorite paintings that I got off of eBay, of all places. An original oil painting on canvas showing a little stream with cooling towers in the background, some vapor coming out of the towers, and some docks on the stream. An old abandoned, almost looks like a tobacco barn, but it doesn't look like a tobacco field was ever there. And you can't really see them, but there's a couple of barrels of radioactive waste floating in the stream. So there's something to that picture for everybody. And here on the wall outside in the corridor is a Up and Atom, A-T-O-M, logo off of an old carrot crate out of California that was framed by some folks up in Virginia. Beautiful little piece. And my nuclear.com cup here with the logo. Let me show that to you. I'm pro-life, therefore pro-nuclear. That's my motto here at nuclear.com. Anyway, I'm tickled to be coming to you not only through the audio that we've been using now for since the day of the Fukushima wreckage began after the tsunami. March 11th, 2011 was the date of the first talk show. And actually that show had been planned, 10 days in advance. And it was a terrible, tragic coincidence that the date of that first show was the date of the great earthquake and tsunami in Japan. My heart goes out to the almost 20,000 people who died in the tsunami. Whole towns were wiped away. And we probably mentioned Fukushima, if not every day, virtually every day here on this show, because it continues. It continues to grab the attention of the world, and it sure has impacted the nuclear industry. Well, let's go to my stack of front page stuff today, and there's an awful lot in the news. One of the things you'll hear here, and now we're posting these on YouTube as well. You can see it. I'll hold up the front pages. We do an exclusive nuclear.com daily review of the front pages from around the world, or many of the front pages. Newseum.org puts out hundreds of front pages every day. You can't search them there at the Newseum site, but you can download the PDFs and search the PDFs, and we get that done. I've hired my first employee. Bless her heart, the first thing she does every day is gets these front pages that mention the word nuclear to me, so that I can take a look at them. And let's review them now. We'll start off with nuclear power news, and then we'll move to away from the front pages just for a moment to talk about other energy and environment news. Then we'll go back to the front pages and talk about nuclear waste and other U.S. DOE nuclear facilities. WIPP is in the news today. Hanford, Savannah River. Then we'll move on to the update on the Mexico stolen cobalt-60 source. Some arrests were made. Then we'll go overseas. Foreign nuclear power news in South Korea. an alarming piece about North Korean brinkmanship, and then a bunch of stories about Iran, including, that estimate that the sanctions relief was going to be worth $6 billion to it. Well, the United States is now saying, we were lowballing that, or we didn't believe Israel telling us it would be $20 to $25 billion worth in that package. But it turns out Israel was right. And some more stuff from Iran, including a current Gulf Cooperation Council meeting, and how they're feeling a little bit apprehensive about the West thawing relations with Iran. All right, nuclear power news. Top story in the Tampa Bay Times is about Crystal River plant decommissioning cost estimates. Nuke shutdown, $1.18 billion is the headline. It will take 60 years to decommission Duke Energy's crippled nuclear plant. Will customers bear more costs, is the subhead. And then back on the continuation page, their headline is $1.18 billion to close nuke plant. They have a picture of the containment building and surrounding buildings there at Crystal River. The nuclear plant's damaged containment building is seen at the center of this photo. The story is by Ivan Penn. Listeners here are familiar with his name. And of course, readers of the Tampa Bay Times are familiar with his name. He writes an awful lot on nuclear stuff. Anyway, here's how the story goes. Duke Energy's shuttered Crystal River nuclear plant will cost $1.18 billion in today's dollars to decommission over the next 60 years, the utility announced Tuesday. Duke expects the current decommissioning fund, along with the interest the fund will earn in the coming decade, and the plant's other owners, to cover the cost. So Duke says, we got enough money in the fund, based on our projections of interest rates over the next 60 years, to fully fund our portion. The decommissioning fund, which Duke's customers paid into as part of their monthly bills over the years, currently stands at about $780 million. The money is used to manage spent fuel stored at the site, dismantle the plant, and clean up any contamination. I'm surprised that they're using the money to store spent fuel. You learn something every day from the front pages, although, I am a little skeptical of reporting that goes on. I think I was reading a quote from Thomas Jefferson about a week or so. One of the local radio stations has asked me to do a series of quotes about the Founding Fathers. Constitutional Moments was the tentative title of the series. And one of the quotes from Thomas Jefferson said, the person who reads no newspapers is, in many ways, better informed than the person who reads every word, because of how many mistakes make it into print. Jefferson was he didn't appreciate a lot of the mud slinging going on in the press back when he was president. An awful lot of ad hominems and reckless charges and lies, he said, were made. And made it into print. All right. Anyway, the reason I'm surprised to hear that they were using the decommissioning fund for spent fuel expenses is because these spent fuel expenses are actually damages. The original plan when Crystal River was built, as well as virtually all the 100 operating plants in existence, the original plan was you have a small pool on site, you defuel a third of the reactor, remove it each year at refueling, let it cool off for about 6 months, and then ship it off to a reprocessing plant. That was the business model. The reason that the spent fuel costs, Now, our damages is because the federal government said, we're changing our minds on reprocessing. There will be no reprocessing of commercial spent nuclear fuel here in the United States, and all of you utilities have to sign this contract that we will develop. That was in 1979, I believe. The contract was actually finalized in the early 80s, maybe 1984. And the contract said that the federal government will take possession of your spent fuel by a date certain, and that's that. You'll collect a 1 mil per kilowatt hour fee, 0.01 cents per kilowatt hour, and pay it into the Nuclear Waste Fund to help the federal government defray its costs in developing a high-level waste storage facility. So these costs are not decommissioning costs for the spent fuel. These costs are damages that the federal government owes back to the utility. And I read a lot of stuff, and I'm getting to the age where I forget more than I remember. But I don't recall anyone using decommissioning funds to pay for their spent fuel costs so far. All right. They move on. There's a quote from the state public counsel who represents consumers before the Public Service Commission, J.R. Kelly. We're certainly encouraged by the fact that Duke believes it will not have to seek any other money from ratepayers. But Kelly warned not to assume that there won't be any additional cost. You won't really know until you progress over the years through decommissioning, he said. One cost not considered part of the decommissioning is building permanent fuel storage units at the site. That will cost at least $94 million, a bill that Duke's 1.7 million Florida customers might have to pay. But as I say, these are damages, and every company that has submitted damages, there may be quibbling about whether some of the costs were appropriate, but generally they're getting all these costs recovered. Certainly the cask costs and the ISPC costs. There's been no question on any of those costs as being damages that the federal taxpayers end up paying, or since we're just printing money these days by the trillions a year, it's actually our children and grandchildren who are on the hook for paying those damages. May God help us and them. I want to pass on the blessings of liberty to my children, not a mountain of debt for their for my prospective grandchildren. If they're born, I forget what the figure is, but it's $50,000 worth of debt when you're born. You're welcome to America, new citizen. All right, Duke filed details of its decommissioning plan with the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission on Tuesday, including cost and the method it would use, called safe storage, known in the industry as Safe Store, SAFSTOR. In Safe Store, a nuclear facility is left intact or may be partially dismantled to decontaminate the facility over time. Quote, decommissioning the Crystal River plant will be a well-defined process with significant NRC oversight, said Duke Energy Crystal River Decommissioning Director Terry Hobbs. Quote, nuclear safety will remain Duke Energy's top priority. The plant will remain in a safe, stable condition, and our comprehensive emergency plan and 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week security force will remain in place. Putting the plant in safe storage will save millions in upfront costs while letting natural decay do most of the decontamination, said Duke, which owns almost 92% of the plant. Municipal utilities own the rest. Only a handful of plants around the country are in safe storage, including 3 Mile Island, the infamous 3 Mile Island, they put it, reactor near Middletown, Pennsylvania, where a 1979 meltdown became one of the worst nuclear disasters in American history. So is the nuclear ship NS Savannah, the world's first nuclear cargo passenger ship, and a showcase of President Dwight Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace initiative, which is now docked outside a Baltimore pier. U.S. nuclear plants store used fuel on site, either in pools or dry casks, because the country does not have a central repository. The spent fuel at the Crystal River plant will remain in an existing on-site pool until Duke completes construction of the dry cask storage in 2016. All used fuel will be transferred from the pool into dry storage by 2019. Duke's plan calls for the spent fuel to be transferred to the Department of Energy in 2036, by which time a more permanent storage solution is presumably in place. Yes, do not try holding your breath until a permanent spent fuel storage solution is in place. The empty dry cask storage facility will be dismantled with other buildings in 2072 is the plan. Now that may work. Radiological and environmental monitoring will continue during the entire process. In February, Duke announced the closing of the Crystal River nuclear plant after a failed do-it-yourself maintenance and upgrade project in 2009. I like the way they put it. Yes, Progress Energy thought they could manage I think it was a steam generator replacement project where it involved cutting a big hole in the containment building, and they ended up doing damage to the containment. More trouble than it's worth, new owner Duke decided. That's why Crystal River shut down. Hundreds of people looking for work. And I don't know if it's actually hurting economics-wise with cheap natural gas available, and Florida's pretty dependent on natural gas. But anybody who's banking on natural gas staying so cheap is probably going to lose that bet. Anyway, so they give a bunch of background. Estimates to repair the building reached as high as $3.4 billion. Duke decided to shut the plant rather than fix it and risk another failure. But even closing the plant is costing customers a bundle. They're paying $1.7 billion for the attempted upgrade, plus as much as $300 million a year to purchase electricity to replace what the nuclear plant would have produced. Add to that at least $1.5 billion to build a new natural gas plant that Duke intends to construct, in part to replace the nuclear plant. NRC spokesman Roger Hanna said the agency will review Duke's plan to determine the decommissioning plan to determine if it meets federal laws and standards for decommissioning a nuclear plant. A public comment period will be held within a few months. He said if the NRC determines Duke's plan is insufficient, the NRC spokesman said, it could raise the cost of decommissioning and lead to more than the $1.18 billion Duke currently estimates. And they end up with an anti-nuclear spokesman's quote, "Nuclear is neither safe, clean, nor cheap," said Susan Glickman of the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. "Nuclear power is expensive, even at the end of its life, and we all pay for it in the end." Now, yesterday, on yesterday's show, and I'm going to pull this back out from the Golden Archives. Yesterday, we highlighted front page story in the Tennessean newspaper where it detailed TVAs, costs of generating per megawatt hour. Hydro's the cheapest, $3. Then nuclear, $6. Coal, $25. Efficient natural gas, $33. Inefficient natural gas, $60. Large-scale solar, $69. Wind, $79. And small-scale solar, $183. Now, you tell me that nuclear is more expensive. Well, no. They've maxed out on hydro. They had a good year for hydro there in Florida. But the rest of them don't come close to nuclear. Not coal, not gas. So the anti-nuclear person who makes these statements that it's not cheap, I say the data shows different. When they say it's not safe, I say the data shows differently. Nuclear power is the safest way to generate a lot of electricity. What can I say? I've been interested in energy and environment, public health, occupational health, since before my first job at a nuclear plant. I was a debater in high school and college, and we often talked about energy issues. I was interested in climate issues back then, and we're going to get into some climate stories here in a few minutes from today's news. Like I said, my motto at nuclear.com, I'm pro-life. That's why I'm pro-nuclear. It's because nuclear is safe. Here, I'll put that logo. Product placement. YouTube says, do you have product placement? I don't think that's product placement, is it? Because this is nuclear.com daily. It's not like I'm putting, I probably can't say the name of the soft drink company. Anyway, if you'd like your product placed here, give me a ring and I'll look into whether I could continue to post on YouTube with product placement. My number is 843-281-0288, and I hope you'll be able to get through. We've got our first ad in the local newspaper, Barefoot Bargaineer, for a new business I started up here in North Myrtle Beach called www.nmb.sc. I just moved here in June. I used to live a few subway stops north of NRC headquarters in Rockville, Maryland, and many years ago, when my wife and I were a young couple looking forward to the future, one of the things we said we wanted to do was, when time came to retire, we'd move here to the Myrtle Beach area. I have family here, deep roots, going back to before the Revolutionary War. Here, my ancestors are buried up and down the Grand Strand area. George Washington, when he spent the night, the archives, National Archives records that on his South Carolina tour after he was elected president, he spent the night here with my uncle, my great uncle Jeremiah Vereen. And local legend has it that the part of North Myrtle Beach that I live in used to be known as the city of Windy Hill. That it actually got its name from a comment that George Washington made that night when he was staying here. One story says his hat blew off, and he said, "My, what a windy hill." Anyway, so that's what they call it, is Windy Hill. So I'm here at the Windy Hill Center next to the post office in North Myrtle Beach. You're looking at the inside of the office. You can see a picture of the outside of the office by going to... I'm not sure where I've got it posted. I probably got it posted on Facebook and LinkedIn and Google Plus, and it might even be at www.nmb.sc itself, which is the name of my business. And my goal is to help North Myrtle Beach to thrive. And anyway, it's paradise, ladies and gentlemen. This is a place of beauty, and I think we have an opportunity to attract much, much more in this new information age economy, where so many people they can work anywhere they want. Our city won a Google designation of being South Carolina's e-city due to our great citywide access to broadband internet and existing business use of the internet. I think we can build on that and do great things. And so I've set up a storefront, trying to hasten that effort and empower folks to start earning money right over the internet. I mean, I've got one plan where people can start off for free, absolutely free, paying nothing. It helps if you've got a debit card, that works. But even people that don't, we can get you started on making money. You can have money in your PayPal account tonight, essentially, if you come in and let us help you set up today, and then we'll help you to make it thrive. I've torn down a wall between two of the offices. You're seeing my small office here. This storefront that I rented had 4 offices. We tore out the walls between 2 of them and made a large conference room that I hope to populate multiple times a week with folks talking about how they can thrive. Political meetings as well. And then I've got one more office. I still haven't quite decided what to do with that small office. I think I'm going to set it up with a computer and a video setup where folks can use free tools to help boost their biz through video use. Anyway, so that was a great story on Crystal River. Moving on to nuclear power news in Canada. One of the top stories, slightly above the fold, in the National Post of Canada, their local edition there. I think it's in Toronto. That's where it comes out of. It didn't make their national edition front page, but it did make the Toronto front page. Ontario Power Generation, OPG, fires 3 executives after damning audit report. And it talks about nepotism, high labor costs, not just nepotism, rampant nepotism, high labor costs, and one of the province's most generous public sector pension plans. Perhaps most alarming of all, the report by Ontario Auditor General identified areas in which OPG's sloppy management practices were potentially compromising nuclear safety. You can see the full story at nationalpost.com. The continuation page, the headline is 62% of OPG staff make more than $100,000. They end the story with Energy Minister Bob Chiarelli saying yesterday that OPG knows the auditor's conclusions are unacceptable. Quote, the auditor's findings indicate that Ontario can and should expect better, and OPG takes this report as seriously as we do. He didn't say Uncle Bob's going to fix it there at OPG, did he? Rampant nepotism. All right, moving away from the front pages just a bit, let's take a look at today's emails. I've got the Dr. Benny Pizer's email today from the Global Warming Policy Foundation. That came out shortly before showtime. Let's first take a look at the Nuclear Energy Institute's daily email. Their top story is Duke Energy submits plans to decommission Crystal River nuclear plant. So their top story was the same as my top story today, and they even have a quote from that was in that Tampa Bay Times article. And they link to an AP story, Charlotte Business Journal blog story, the Power City blog, and a Wall Street Journal link. NEI's emails are interesting, informative. If you haven't signed up for them, I urge you to go to nei.org and do so. Next, Chillicothe Gazette out of Ohio is the link, and NEI titles it, USEC Centrifuge Technology Conditionally Achieves Final 3 Milestones. The final 3 technical milestones intended to demonstrate the practicality of the centrifuge technology at the American Centrifuge Plant in Ohio have been achieved, USEC announced. So this, of course, is enrichment. The findings still must be certified by the Department of Energy. The demonstration cascade is operating as expected, said USEC President and CEO John Welsh. He said the results exceeded the Energy Department's criteria in these final 3 categories. Well, that's great news. I'm glad to hear USEC has been able to survive financially. It was looking pretty iffy for a while there. So they've finished their demonstration stage, and I'm sure they'll be chomping at the bit to get things going commercially. Next, new fuel biz in the news. This is from the Pittsburgh Business Times, which is part of the Business Journals network. Kern Kraftwerk signs another fuel reload contract with Westinghouse. Swiss nuclear plant operator Kern Kraftwerk Liebstadt has extended its fuel reload contract with Westinghouse Electric for 2 additional deliveries. Westinghouse will deliver fuel for the company's nuclear plant in Liebstadt, Switzerland in 2016 and 2017. Congratulations, Westinghouse New Fuel Division. Their next policy watch, or their only policy watch item, details a story that we covered yesterday from the front page of the Chicago Tribune. NEI titles it, Program Repurposed 20,000 Soviet Nuclear Warheads. A total of 20,000 Soviet warheads were repurposed by U.S. scientists to serve as fuel for nuclear energy facilities. Cindy Boggs, a scientist at the Argonne National Lab in Illinois, was one of the Americans who traveled to a remote town in Russia under constant observation, working to enrich the uranium. Well, they bollocks that description up. She wasn't working to enrich the uranium. She was working on downblending. The megatons to megawatts bombs to fuel program formally ended this week with the final shipment of enriched uranium. Then they have a link to a piece there at nei.org, or maybe it's a YouTube video. NEI's Marvin Fertel talks about the success of the program. Let's see, international stories highlighted by NEI, 3 of them today. Japan's Environment Ministry to form panel for radioactive soil transport. A link to a GG Press story. Japan's Environment Ministry this month will form a panel of experts tasked with discussing routes and safety measures for transporting contaminated soil from areas affected by the Fukushima Daiichi incident to planned interim storage sites. Safety measures expected to be discussed include the management of possible increases in traffic accidents and the prevention of the dispersion of radioactive materials during transport. Next, also in Asia, South Korea cuts back nuclear energy share target to 29%. And they have links to Reuters, the Korea Times, and Bloomberg. And let's see, that was one of our front page stories. Here was about North Korea. Which paper did we get? The Korea Times. Oh no, that was the North Korean story, sorry. Oh, it was World Nuclear News that had a story about South Korea today. Nuclear to remain Korean mainstay is how they put it. Anyway, NEI titles it, South Korea cuts back nuclear energy share target to 29%. World Nuclear News, which is a product of the World Nuclear Association, or they're closely affiliated with World Nuclear Association, their headline was, Nuclear to remain Korean mainstay. But in the subhead, they do note that the 29% share for nuclear in South Korean generating capacity by 2035 is actually a reduction. 29% is the plan now. Previous plans called for 41% nuclear by 2035. NEI highlights a quote, if the government's going to keep its nuclear power proportion at 29% by 2035, we would need an additional 6 to 8 nuclear power plants, said a research fellow at the Korean Energy Economics Institute. Meanwhile, a government official there in South Korea, Shin Young-min, director of South Korea's Energy and Resources Policy Division, also is quoted, the previous target was too aggressive to carry out, so we made the revision to a realistic level. So they're saying 6 to 8 new nuclear plants is realistic. Good. Any article that talks about building new nuclear plants in South Korea without talking about the terrible safety culture which allowed collusion in falsifying product quality certificates is premature. And finally, out of the United Kingdom, a nuclear biz story from a publication called The Engineer. They're out of England. More than $21 million available for UK engineering firms for nuclear technology ideas. The UK Technology Strategy Board will offer as much as $21.3 million to help engineering firms in developing innovative technology for the nuclear energy industry in the country. Quote, we're trying to stimulate innovation and develop a robust and innovative supply chain, said Derek Allen, the board's lead technologist for energy. We particularly want to attract small and medium enterprises into the nuclear market. Inspirational quote of the day rounds out NEI's email. Everyone complains of his memory, and no one complains of his judgment. Hey, I mentioned my memory. That's true. I have not complained about my judgment. Good point. That's French writer Francois de la Rochefoucauld. All right, the other email that one of the other emails I look forward to every day is from the Global Warming Policy Foundation. Today's email is titled, China's renewables industry is headed for collapse. Subhead is about Britain's unilateral carbon dioxide targets may have to be abandoned. But back to the China story. China's aggressive push to green its economy and become the world leader in renewable energy is admired by many commentators in the West. Those admirers need to look again. The country's solar panel industry, which went from zero to become the world's largest in 5 years, has crashed, with most producers now suffering from negative profit margins, soaring debt levels, and idle factories. China's experience with wind power is little different. China's green crash is a textbook example of what happens when central planners substitute their economic decrees for the complex supply and demand decisions of a market. And they have a link to the Financial Post newspaper, story by Patricia Adams and Brady Yauch on Monday. China issued its first nationwide blueprint for adapting to climate change as governments around the world shift their efforts from focusing solely on curbing global warming to minimizing its impact on people and the environment. Quote, the government needs to decide what are the most cost-effective measures and which measures will produce the most significant impact. China doesn't have that much money or resources to address everything on this list. That's from the Wall Street Journal yesterday, Wayne Ma. And then they have several stories on Britain backtracking on their carbon dioxide emissions targets. And they also have some urging for Britain to go ahead and follow the new fracking technology to get some more fossil fuels into their mix. General climate science stories, also one of them was covered. Will temperatures on Earth be dropping until the year 2100 to Little Ice Age levels, as Horst Joachim Ludecki, a scientist at Germany's Saarland University, predicted last week? Or will temperatures only plunge until 2060, as Habibullo Abusamatov, the head of Russia's Pulkovo Observatory, recently predicted? Or has the cooling already begun and it might end as soon as 2030, as claimed by Anastasios Sonis, head of the Atmospheric Sciences Group at the University of Wisconsin? And they have a link to an op-ed by Lawrence Solomon. He's I think, a Canadian writer. I very much enjoyed. He writes a lot of nuclear-related stuff, and he's getting more and more interested in CO2-related stories. Just as you'd expect someone who's following the nuclear industry and the prospects for the nuclear industry, the reasons to choose or avoid nuclear new build decisions. You'd expect them to be interested in the science, and I spent literally thousands of hours early on in the George W. Bush administration period doing exactly that, delving into the science journals, literally thousands of hours over the 2-year period in 2001, 2002. And then I backed off some after that because I'd come to some conclusions, including my conclusion that the science is shoddy when it comes to CO2 alarmism. And I'd encourage folks not to empower the alarmists. There's much exaggerating going on, and there's very few of the scientists, actively engaged scientists, who can possibly keep abreast of more than a small part of the scientific advances in knowledge. I found many scientists who reflexively defended their colleagues, but they had no more basis for doing so than any other faith-based based proponent of any scheme, and it's a hard realization for these scientists to say, well, my own discipline needs to police itself much better than we have. But we're seeing more and more scientists come around to that way of thinking. Although there's still the hardcore believers, the true believers in CO2 catastrophism. I don't know if they'll ever give up. Some of them are widely lauded, widely quoted, and my own industry, the nuclear power industry, the big players, they have jumped full bore into empowering these alarmists and their shoddy science, and I think that's a terrible, terrible mistake. Yes, I know that there's many people who are taking a second look at nuclear who were formerly anti-nuclear because they jump on these alarmist projections and say, "Oh gosh, we're beyond the tipping point. It's the science is settled." The denialists, the deniers, they call folks like me. They're just in the pay of the fossil fuel industries. Well, doggone it. I remember one of them said that to me when I was talking to a scientist. This was a PhD out of the University of Wisconsin program. He knew more about computer models than he did about climate, but he was a PhD climatologist. I remember he made that charge about me. He said, "I can't believe that you're not a professional liar in the employ of the fossil fuel industries." And my answer was, "Well, I do get a 10-cent discount every Thursday on the high test gas that I put into my Camaro. But other than that, that's the only financial consideration I get from any of the fossil fuel companies." All right, moving on to nuclear waste related stories. The phone's ringing. Man, here it is, 1 o'clock already. Phone's ringing. Could it be that the first of the barefoot trader advertisements? I mentioned that I'm running my first ad today. It says Steve Schulin will help you, or help North Myrtle Beach to thrive, or help you to thrive. And it targets existing business owners, and it also targets individuals who are looking for something more, trying to make ends meet. I want to help them all. All right. Anyway, so it had our phone number, and I suspect our phones will be ringing quite a bit this afternoon as the mail gets delivered. All right. WIPP proposal dead for now. Waste isolation pilot project is the top story in the Carlsbad Current Argus out of New Mexico. Let me get my iMovie thing here so I can see it. WIPP proposal dead for now. Also out of New Mexico, the Albuquerque Journal put WIPP on their front page. Pearce and Udall spar over WIPP measure. Okay, Pearce was the U.S. Representative, Steve Pearce, who had suggested an amendment to allow more types of transuranic waste to be brought into WIPP. For example, he wanted waste that was currently stored at Los Alamos to be allowed to be disposed of at WIPP. That apparently is off the table. Savannah River Site, an update on the story we covered yesterday. The Augusta Chronicle has a front page piece. Group questions bringing more waste to Savannah River. And it was a hearing yesterday by the Citizens Advisory Board, a committee of the Citizens, SRS Citizens Advisory Board. The article discusses some of the broad concerns. There was a comment on the website here of the Augusta Chronicle from Tom Clements, who I think he was quoted in the article as well. Anyway, Clements commented on the article. The German reactor fuel, known as AVR, consists of 152 large casks holding about 290,000 highly radioactive graphite balls, originally containing some U.S. origin highly enriched uranium. Before moving further with any consideration of bringing this material to the Savannah River Site, an environmental impact statement must be prepared, including description of how it would be processed and the final disposition of it. German media has reported that shipping it to the United States could cost 450 million euros, which is 600 million US, and that is the real reason that Savannah River is interested in taking the waste, not nuclear non-proliferation. Why should Savannah River take in more hard-to-manage, high-level waste when it is struggling to deal with what's already at the site? Clements asks. Germany should deal with its own waste, he says. Well, see, he's saying Savannah River's only interested in the revenue. This is a common criticism voiced by folks that I don't agree with politically. And I don't know Tom Clements from Adam. I've read his stuff. He appears to be technically proficient. But when he makes claims to know what's in the minds of the folks at Savannah River, I think he's jumping to conclusions. Tom Clements, if you want to come on the show live and discuss this, you are more than welcome. It's my goal to have folks from every nuclear facility around the world checking in on a regular basis. Heck, I'd like to have every nuclear plant, somebody to come in and talk about every nuclear plant every week. Here we could schedule a set time every week for each representative of each plant. I think it would be a great outreach tool for plants around the country, and a great education tool for people who aren't nuclear savvy. Tri-City Herald lead story is about Hanford cleanup. Let's see here. Final plan for cleanup announced at the Hanford 300 area. Uranium groundwater plume to be addressed. Well, isn't that good news? This is a story by a writer that folks who follow Hanford is familiar with, Annette Carey of the Tri-City Herald. The continuation page headline is Cleanup Advisory Board has recommended testing methods effectiveness. Elsewhere in the world, arrests made. 6 suspects were arrested in Mexico related to the theft of that truck carrying a medical radioactive source, a cobalt-60 source. I forget how many curies. I think it said it had an activity of 111 terabecquerels. I'd seen something in curies that was like 2 million curies. I'd have to do the math to see if those numbers match up. But anyway, none of the suspects appeared to be suffering from any effects of high radiation exposure. I'd say they probably don't have the right suspects, because The story I heard said that the source had actually been removed from the equipment, although it had not been damaged. The Korea Times, North Korea may revert to brinkmanship, is their lead story. Let's see here. Bring it over to the camera. North Korea may revert to brinkmanship. You mean they've gone away from brinkmanship? Well, you can see the full story at www.ktimes.co.kr. Iran. One headline that I'm going to stress here. We're starting to run beyond the hour. Sanctions relief is worth $20 billion to Iran, U.S. officials admit. This is Haaretz at the top of the page. Americans tell Israeli colleagues, we greatly underestimated the benefits to Iran. Washington Post has a story below the fold on Iran. A House committee hints of more sanctions on Iran. They have a picture of Secretary Kerry rubbing his head like, this is a headache for me. The continuation page headline there in the Washington Post. The headline is Hill Panel Criticizes Administration on Iran. This story is by Washington Post's Ann Gearan, Gearan, and you can see the whole story at WashingtonPost.com. Congress and Kerry spar over Iran nuclear deal is the lead story in the New York City-based Jewish newspaper Hamodia. Now they have a Reuters headline, a Reuters article under that headline, and the identical headline, Kerry, Congress spar over Iran nuclear deal, also shows up in the Brainerd Dispatch of Minnesota, Brainerd, Minnesota, and they have an AP story. So that's unusual for the AP and Reuters to have the exact same headline. And finally, some Middle Eastern newspapers, United Arab Emirates and Kuwait, have stories about the Gulf Cooperation Council summit. And, these summits have previously been almost exclusively economic in their orientation. They are moving beyond economics, and part of it is they are very concerned with the deal making going on with Iran. The whole reason that the Gulf Cooperation Council was set up was in reaction to the Islamic Revolution in Iran. Anyway, the headlines today: GCC to approve military command. It's from the National magazine out of the United Arab Emirates. Also out of the UAE, the Khalij Times. GCC summit opens with call to end catastrophe in Syria. And in Kuwait, the Arab Times. Amir issues call to end war in Syria. Cooperation is a shield from danger. And the headline above the headline, Saudi push for Gulf Union faces summit hurdles. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the front page news review from nuclear.com daily. Follow us on Twitter, nuclearcom, all one word. Link up with us on LinkedIn, nuclearcom, all one word. Like us on Facebook, nuclearcom, all one word. Subscribe to us on iTunes, nuclear Nuclear.com Daily. I forget if there's a dot in there or not. They're on iTunes. You can hit the subscribe button at TalkShoe, or right there at the front of nuclear.com, on the website www.nuclear.com. There's a listen live kind of button for the TalkShoe shows, and you can subscribe to the podcast, or you can subscribe now via YouTube. Like I say, I got the first video up yesterday, and hopefully I'll be able to do the same thing today. So thanks, everybody. I hope you have a great day and a great rest of the week. And those of you in the nuclear biz, make it another safe one, my friends. This is Steve Schulin signing off for nuclear.com Daily.